Hello, everybody. Welcome to TSAM Digital. I'm Anam Khan. I'm the head of content at Foxon Media. And joined by me today, I have Danny Donado. Danny is the founder and CEO at Bipsync. Hello, Danny. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much, Danny, for joining us today. To kick things off, it would be brilliant if you could give us a brief introduction about yourself and let our audience know about Bipsync.
Sure. So I am the founder and CEO of Bipsync, which is a research management platform. Our end users are investment management firms, so asset managers, um, fund managers, allocators. So really serves the gamut of the investment management space. My background personally is as a professional investor, so that really is where the genesis of Bipsync came from. Today we we have offices across both the US and the UK, and have been building out the team over the last couple of years, and particularly this year, in spite of COVID, has actually been a great growth year for Bipsync and research technology in general.
Brilliant. Good to know. Good to know. To kick things off, Danny, my first question is, what are the rising trends, technology trends that are becoming a priority for your client base?
Sure. I think the way I like to think about this is kind of two-pronged, right? So one is trends that we were seeing prior to COVID that are continuing, right? And then others that were accelerated with COVID, right? So I think in terms of trends that we were seeing before that are still continuing, I think the big one is really firms laying down the digital scaffolding as it relates to their research data, right? And so what I mean by that is the ability to digitally capture data, right? To normalize and store that data, and then basically to have programmatic access to that data so they can interoperate with other systems, right? So it's kind of the blocking and tackling, so to speak, but that really is the enabling layer that allows you to leverage data across a range of applications, whether it's in the investment research side, whether it's for portfolio analytics or whatnot, right? You need to have all of the stuff, right, in a form that can be easily pulled, edited and leveraged across the firm. In terms of trends that we've seen accelerated post-COVID, I would say it's definitely collaboration and mobility, or put differently, systems that enable flexible and remote working without compromising a firm's compliance posture, right? So a couple of big kind of subtopics here. So increased focus on operational resiliency and agility. I don't think anyone really war gamed for a scenario in terms of everyone working 100% of the time from home, right? That obviously happened this year, and I think it's a part of the internal planning operations now, right? So you need to be able to handle those types of situations, right? Next is bridging the collaboration and knowledge gaps that are associated with a distributed workforce, right? So you're no longer in an office, you don't have those water cooler conversations, right? So how do you maintain, that ability to share knowledge and information, which is critical to the investment process, right? It's knowledge work. And then I would say the third subtopic on that is how do you maintain productivity and really kind of manage the research process remotely, right? Again, there's that lack of physical oversight that you're there. So how do you coordinate? How do you make sure that there is sort of a consistent level of work, right? So technology sort of all plays into that.
Danny, what are the market forces affecting asset managers right now, and how is that driving the rise in research management demand?
Sure. So there's several forces at play, obviously, but I think one that I like to focus on in particular are ESG mandates, right? And the reason I like to focus on those is because there's both internal and external factors at play, right? So in terms of the internal factors, and if you think about it, by nature, incorporating ESG adds an extra layer of process, right? Anything from establishing a formal framework, scoring mechanisms, handoffs, approval processes, tracking the process, and then running reports and analytics off of it, right? So generally speaking, anything that increases the complexity and the formality of the research process, it's going to require the need of a more formal system of record or a process management system to be able to execute, right? So that's I think a very important internal factor. If you think about external factors, regulatory forces, right, regarding ESG. So, the pending provisions with SFDR and MiFID, right? I mean, they effectively are going to necessitate that managers formulate policies on how they incorporate sustainability risks in their investment process and taking into account investor preferences on the matter, right? So, again, those are external forces that, again, relate to ESG that directly drive the need for a research management platform.
And could you please explain how research management has changed over recent years, and what are the complexities and misconceptions around it?
Sure. So I guess a little bit of historical context. Historically, the big issue with research management technologies in general, I think, has been twofold. One is adoption, and two is flexibility. Right. So the point of adoption, if you think about it, right, what's different about a research management platform is that it's focused on the front office, right, on the investment professionals, right. So they're finicky, they have tastes and preferences, and in today's modern world where you have a lot of great consumer tools, right, they have a lot of options and alternatives. So it's hard to kind of get them to mandate to use of a platform unless it genuinely makes their life easier, right? So this notion of voluntary adoption, right, is key. So historically, research management platforms have been very they've found it challenging, let's put it that way, to maintain voluntary user adoption, right? So in theory, it's great, but if the box is empty, there's no point, right? And then the second issue is, even if you manage to get buy-in from everyone to use these types of systems, right, there's the point of flexibility. Every firm does things differently, right, in terms of how they conduct investment research, right? They each have their own secret sauce, right? So historically, it's also been very difficult for third-party software to be able to provide something that effectively catered to a firm on an individual basis, which is why you saw firms effectively build their own type of internal research platforms, right? So I think what's happening over the course of the last few years is you've really seen a confluence of factors. For example, the modernization, right, of the tech stack. So a couple of factors here, right? So there's the shift to cloud, which obviously has affected every industry. It's been delayed in investment management for a number of reasons, but look, there's the inherent cost and scale benefits of it, right? So we've seen the pronounced shift in the last 4 years alone. I think if you asked me 4 years ago, probably 50% of conversations, clients were asking about on-prem, right? Whereas today it's maybe less than 10%, right? So there's more of a comfort of these modern technologies that scale. Second, in terms of the buy versus build decision, I think firms are realizing, right, what their core competencies are, right? And so design, for example, usually isn't one of them, right? So stay in your lane. I think that logic applies here, right? So the increased interest in making third-party platforms work, right, to save on the investment and also let them do what they do best, right? So I think that, coupled with the consumerization of IT in general, again, great modern consumer tools, Dropbox, Evernote, which investment professionals have access to, all of these have kind of sort of driven the research management space, towards the direction of being, more focused on usability, more focused on being configurable, right, to be able to adapt to a firm's unique workflows, right? And basically, our view on this is, in order to have a successful sort of product in this space, you basically have to ensure that people love the product, that they want to use it, and two, that it's super configurable, right? So if you can get 80 to 85% of the configurability that you would if you built it internally, right, that I think is a very good element to shoot for, and I think that alleviates a ton of burden from the internal tech operations of asset management firms. So that really has enabled, I think, a best of breed approach, right? Again, when you think about modern platforms that are API driven or whatnot, right, you can build sort of a stack that incorporates the best elements, whether it's research management, whether it's portfolio analytics, right? You not only don't have to build everything in-house, right, but you can mix and match and pick the best elements of your tech stack.
And when it comes to research management, what has worked with your clients and what has not?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. Again, with research management, again, configurability, I think, is a big point that we've got from the get-go, right? And it's tough because it's oftentimes firms don't necessarily know how they want to achieve something, but they come into a project to deploy a research management system with a very kind of prescriptive mindset, right? Whereas what we found is most effective usually is, let's take a step back, let's work, from the end result backwards. What are you ultimately trying to do? I.e., what reports do you eventually want to generate? I.e., what are the specific pain points that you currently have, right? And then we can basically figure out a way, right, to solve those, as opposed to doing it in the way you think will solve the issue, right? And I think it's that kind of mindset which we found if we can help clients get over early on, it usually leads to a better outcome, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, right? Especially when it comes to technology today, you can do a lot of things that you couldn't do in the past, right? So I think that mindset is one, and then I think another one is in terms of data management in general. I think the sooner that we can get clients into a normalized central system of record, the better. I think the most challenging deployments in general, right, are going to be instances in which there isn't a central database, where there's a lot of different data silos, right? And that is going to be an issue regardless of what sort of platform you're on, right? But the act of aggregating everything and normalizing it, it's something that every firm is going to have to do at one point or another. And the sooner that you do it, the better off you'll be, because then you can start to leverage modern technology.
And what is next on the horizon for research management and research tech? Where do we go from here?
Right, so I think there's a couple of areas, right? So I think continuing on this notion of laying down the digital scaffolding so you can be able to leverage data, I think that really is becoming a fundamental part of research operations, right? So once the digital scaffolding is in place, then you can focus on the higher order things, like how do you leverage that data? So things like AI, right? It all comes more in play, right? Continuing down that train of thought, sort of the increased use of alternative data providers, I think is going to be interesting, right? Because there's a ton of alternative data available out there. Everyone wants to make use of it, but if you think about the logistics of actually leveraging that data, so aggregating it, getting it into a normalized store, right, being able to like handle all the licensing issues, right, it's a pain, right? So in terms of being able to really leverage that, I think you're going to start to see firms start to incorporate that in a more user-friendly way. And then I think also new investment information distribution models, right? So particularly in response to MiFID II, right? How do you reduce noise and offer an enhanced client experience, right? So you have to be more curated, right? You can't just adopt an approach of spray and pray. So those are just a few of the elements that I think are going to be areas of focus here in the coming years.
And lastly, we're finally approaching to the end of the interview. My final question is around COVID-19. How has COVID-19 and working from home situation affected your clients? And of course, how has that affected you working with your clients?
Yeah, sure. So on the first part of it, I think the interesting thing is we've seen usage increase just across the board, right? And we would expect that because we're a cloud-based system, right? And I think the best compliments that we got, and really was sort of I think validation of the product category is when our clients were saying, you know what, we didn't skip a beat in terms of operations, right? When everyone was sent from home, because they already worked in Bipsync, it's accessible wherever they are, right? So that I think really was a point of pride for us, and we saw the increase of adoption just across the user base. It was already high, but call it on an order of magnitude of 20% increase, right? Just like for like. I think in terms of how we interact with our clients, really the most tangible way I think that has manifested is really with new client implementation, right? I think that's the one part where historically, right, it would have required an on-campus presence, right, to get things up and running, particularly with larger firms. But we actually have adapted well to that, and I think it's shown that you could do an awful lot remotely. At the end of the day, it's software, right? And it's cloud-based, and happy to say that we've onboarded actually our largest clients this year, right? And it's been all done remotely. So it's required some adapting on both the client as well as our side, but I think the proof is in the pudding, right? It's worked out well.
And how do you think things will change going forward? How will the industry as a whole adapt to these changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, these elements are here to stay, right? So whenever we go through a new vendor procurement process, right, there's diligence involved, right? We're already seeing that reflected in the due diligence questionnaires, right? In terms of our own sort of cybersecurity posture, how we account for remote work, and of course of the pandemic, that's already being incorporated in there, right? So that's going to have lasting effects in terms of how firms war game and sort of plan out for these types of contingencies, right? So that I think is definitely here to stay, and I think a positive impact has also been this. I think what we're going to see a sustained openness, right, to deploying these types of systems in a remote fashion. I think, again, there's been a natural historical tendency to think about this in terms of on-site, right? The physical presence is necessary, necessary, necessary. If anything, I think, the fact that we have been successful in doing it remotely, I think in some ways is liberating to firms and adds an element of reassurance, right? That they don't need to kind of hold the line on every kind of project and initiative simply because, right, they can't be in the office with everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Danny, for your time and for this really nice discussion. Hopefully our audience have enjoyed this as well, and they can join us again at TSAM Investment Operations to hear more from you and from Bipsync.
Great. Thank you.